Mara Aveline first felt the summons as a pressure behind her eyes, like a telescope pulled suddenly into focus on a star she had not meant to seek. She was on the roof of the Royal Observatory, midnight inks pooling across the city domes, when the pressure sharpened into a whisper. "Look down to look up. Come where the dark begins." Then the brass eyepiece cracked, its lens frosting not with frost but with a silvery grit that shimmered, pulsed, and funneled itself into a spiral that pointed not above but below the marble tiles beneath her feet. A sensible astronomer would have fled. Mara pried up the tile instead. Beneath lay a stairwell no mason had ever laid. Each step was obsidian, yet moon-pale glyphs rippled across them as though written in living milk. The pressure behind Mara's eyes flared hotter, but not painfully so. It was curiosity's ache, the ache all true stargazers carry. She took a breath thick with petrichor and climbed down. When she reached the final landing, an impossible landscape awaited, a cavernous void where rivers, black as ink, flowed upward in perfect defiance of gravity, threading through jagged arches of bone and basalt, before vanishing into an overhead vault of night that was not sky but stone. Each inverted current bore streaks of starlight, as though it siphoned luminescence from some hidden spring and carried it aloft to the stars. And waiting on the river's bank stood the Ferrier. The creature was all bone and corded sinew, cloaked in a cowl woven from boat sails dyed the colour of smoke. Its skull was long, vaguely equine, but studded with extra eye sockets whose glassy hollows winked with soft blue flames. One hand held a polearm shaped like a shepherd's crook, the other clutched a ledger bound in flayed bark. It bowed with brittle courtesy. "Mara Aveline, chart reader of the High Meridian," it rasped, voice like pages turning in a crypt. "I am Cara Fair, Ferrier Emeritus of the Upriver, appraiser of souls, custodian of the ledger post-mortem. You are not yet dead, which is irregular, but we are pressed for time." Mara swallowed. Pressed by what? The Ferrier gestured to the rivers. "Flow. Every soul that dies in the mortal realm must ascend these tributaries to the star vault above, where they crystallize into constellations. Only when mapped, named, and balanced do their stories settle and stardust drizzle safely back down dreams, prophecies, the soft shine on newborn skin. If they are unmapped, the dust pours unguided, drowning the living in memories not their own. A flood is imminent." It snapped the ledger shut with an echo that boomed like cannon fire. "We have lost track." Mara's thoughts flickered through the lectures of her mentor, Professor Albrecht, who had once joked that every astronomer behaves like a midwife for ghosts. She forced her voice steady. "Why me?" "Because you look up," Karov answered simply. "And because your birth name was written in my ledger by someone with very fine penmanship." It held the book open. Sure enough, her name curled there in silver ink, the date of her death, blank. "Someone in the mortal realm wants to keep breathing. The bargain is thus: map the constellations of the newly dead before the next moonrise, and you and your petitioners remain living." Mara blinked. "Petitioners?" Karov tapped a skeletal finger on her name. "Your brother Elias scribbled the request, offered half his future heartbeat allotment as down payment. A remarkable lad." Mara cursed softly. Elias, a poet who'd traded health for inspiration all his life, must have found an occult loophole. "If I refuse?" Then the rivers backlog by dawn, burst their seams and wash the upper world in a blizzard of unsorted stardust. Madness, miracle, entropy, the usual. The Ferrier cocked its skull. "You will do it. You would never let a puzzle loom unanswered." Mara hated how right it was. She squared her shoulders. "Give me the instruments." Karov beckoned. From within the lee of a limestone pillar slithered a barge hewn of driftwood and ribbone. Its prow curved like a sickle. Its deck glimmered with embedded opals, that pulsed faintly to a heartbeat cadence Mara recognized as her own. At the center stood a brass tripod supporting a contraption she'd designed in nightmares. A sextant merged with an astrolabe and a mariner's compass, all gears and silvered mirrors, the arcs etched with constellations she'd charted in childhood. She stepped onto the barge. The deck shuddered, adjusting for her living weight. Karov followed, thumping its polearm once against the gunwale. Instantly, the vessel lifted, not forward but upward, drawn into the nearest river like a leaf swallowed by reverse gravity. Water, or what passed for it, splashed silently against the hull, cool as dew and heavy with motes of light. "Your task is triune," Karov intoned. "First, find the break in the star vault where the souls have jammed. Second, decode their stories to allocate them into constellations. Third, seal the rift so flow resumes. Understand?" "Partly." Mara adjusted the mirrors on the hybrid sextant, pinching a gear to steady the jittery azimuth needle. "What's the time frame?" "In mortal hours, 9. The rift lies directly above the celestial cataract at the apex of the upriver. After that..." It made a slashing motion across its own throatless neckbone. The barge gained speed. Around them, other vessels ferried cargo, coffins, seed vaults, faded banners, each guided by shades with lanterns hanging from antlers or horns. None carried living flesh. Mara felt very warm despite the river's chill. She set to work, turning the sextant toward the stone vault overhead. At first, she saw only rock shimmering with mineral mica. Then the lenses pierced deeper. Beyond the stone hovered the familiar tapestry of stars, but the patterns had mutated. Orion's belt sagged with an extra buckle. Lyra twisted into a noose. Ursa Major had lost an eye and gained a wound. Worse, a whirlpool of pearly dust churned near the zenith as though the sky had cracked and was bleeding light. "That whirlpool is the backlog?" she asked. "It is the throat of tomorrow choking on yesterday," Karov replied. "The more who die, the wider it yawns." Mara swallowed and bent to the brass map table, whose surface resembled the night sky captured in mercury, stars bobbing like air bubbles. She touched one luminous bead. A whisper echoed. "Louisa Fern, aged 98. Baker of Varensburg." Laughter smelled of cinnamon. Another. "Feng Hao, aged 27. Dream flute maker. Died unfinished song." Each soul glimmered with a story fragment. Thousands swarmed in frantic loops like bees unable to return to hive. "I'll need an indexing scheme," Mara murmured. She recalled the ancient theory of mythic taxonomy: heroic, pastoral, tragic, cosmic, sacred. Maybe stories could tessellate under such headings. She reoriented the mirrors to carve the map table into 5 segments, each glowing a different hue. To her relief, many beads drifted automatically towards suitable quadrants. Tales of lost love joined the tragic arc. War heroes rallied under heroic. Stillborn infants floated to sacred. But a sizable fraction flickered uncertainly, caught between categories or belonging to none. "These are the outliers," Karov observed. "Spirits who died in liminality, star-crossed, unrepented, half-believed. They tangle the grid." Mara glanced at the whirlpool, which pulsed brighter. Time drained. "Help me," she demanded. "You know the underhistories." The Ferrier knelt, placing skeletal palms atop the map table. Where bone touched light, new glyphs ignited, forming tributaries between clusters. "Create hybrids," it advised. "Constellations of contradiction. Afterlife thrives on paradox." Mara nodded, fingers flying. She sketched lines. The broken cupbearer, for souls who saved others while spilling themselves. The singing silence, for mute composers and unheard poets. The lantern doubt, for scientists who dismantled gods yet prayed at dusk. Each time she drew a shape, stars snapped into place, locking like magnets, yet the outliers only partially shrank, The worst remained, souls whose stories were severed, missing context or memory, blank yet heavy as lead. Those orbited the whirlpool like wreckage. Karov hissed. Those are the unnamed. If they exceed a critical mass, the dust will reverse entirely, fall insurgent upon the mortal realm. How do we name what we don't know? The Ferrier's many eye flames dim. You must descend to the threshold of echoes. Hear their final words. Mara's stomach dipped. But we ascend, not descend. Rivers flow both ways in the underworld if you pay the toll. Karov removed one of its rib bones and snapped it in half, producing a splinter of ivory glowing with violet fire. Toss this into the current. The water will invert. She did. The barge lurched, pivoting downward along a new channel that punched through bedrock like a plummet. It disappeared. The barge lurched, pivoting downward along a new channel that punched through bedrock like a plummet. Soon the river became a waterfall, except it gushed upward beside them, while the vessel dropped through hollows lined with mirrors, showing Mara as a child, as an old woman, as ashes. They reached a cavern whose ceiling was an air vast, veined, pressed to the ground as though the world listened. Whispers grew as wind, half-phrases, incomplete names, stuttering recollections. Mara adjusted the sextant to capture not light but vibration. Mirrors tuned themselves into tympanic membranes, gears ticked like metronomes. She triangulated on clusters of overlapping impulses, filtering noise until the shape of absence emerged, a negative image. From the emptiness arose a chorus. Remember we were the ones between borders. Remember we were unborn of tongue. Remember the future we never met. Mara's recording needles scratched these syllables into thin copper discs she loaded into the map table. Instantly, new constellation frameworks bloomed. The half-print, the border walker, the unbegun. The unnamed stars flickered as though recognizing home. One by one they slid into place, and the whirlpool overhead shrank to a tight spiral. She exhaled giddy relief. Too soon. Stone groaned. The cavern's giant ear peeled from the ceiling, revealing beneath it a mouth. A thing emerged, tall as ruin, cloaked in scrolls that unraveled into talons. Eyes were hourglasses leaking ash. Karov swore in a tongue older than stone. What is that? The auditor. The Ferrier spat. A regulator of cosmic balance. It believes living interference is heresy. The auditor leapt onto the barge. Scrolls coiled around the sextant, cracking gears. Mara snatched at her instrument, but parchment burned like acid where it touched. Eroth intercepted, driving its polearm between the creature and the tripod. Bone met scroll. Sparks flew. Finish the map, Keroth ordered. I will distract. Mara's heart hammered. She had 2 tasks left. Seal the rift and escape. The sextant was crippled, but the map table still pulsed. She rummaged through her satchel, produced a stub of chalk, and began drawing directly onto the Mercury surface, joining last stray stars into a ring. She labeled it the Ferrier's Promise. Above, the whirlpool narrowed further, yet a crack opened at its center, pressure equalizing. Stardust rained, thin but razor-bright. Where grains touched water, steam screamed. Karov battled the auditor across the deck, polearm clashing with parchment blades. The Ferrier was agile despite skeletal form, but the auditor healed every cut by rewriting itself. Fragments of lore curling over wounds. Mara realized brute resistance would fail. Write me in, she shouted. Karov pivoted. Explain! Put my living story into the ledger temporarily. If I'm not living, the auditor has no heresy to punish. Karov's eye flames flared. You gamble with total death. I'm an astronomer. I gamble with infinities nightly. The Ferrier jammed the polearm into the deck, freeing clawed hand to open the ledger. With a quill of its own rib splinter, it scratched through Mara's blank date and inscribed the current hour. Ice flooded her limbs. Breath left. Color drained until her skin was moonstone. She was dead on paper, which in Underworld was all that mattered. The auditor hesitated, scrolls twitching as logic recalibrated. Mara seized the moment. Diving to the map table, she inverted the chalk, using its blunt end to press on the ring of the Ferrier's promise. The constellation flared, linking to all others, forming a mosaic, a complete sky. The crack above sealed with a thunderclap. Upward rivers resumed sucking the last loose stars into safe orbit. Stardust fell now in orderly glints, gentle as snowfall. Balance restored, the auditor folded its scrolls, eyes dimming. It bowed to Mara with reluctant recognition and dissolved into moths of loose punctuation. Mara slumped, half corporeal, her pulse a memory. Karov approached, ledger open. You did it, flow normalized. The mortal realm will survive. Its voice held something like pride. Then, time to erase your death mark. Wait. Mara's gaze drifted upward through the now clear stone vault where constellations shimmered, whole. She felt calm, detached. Elias bettered half his heartbeat allotment. Without it, he'll die young. Could we transfer what I just sacrificed? Karov considered. You seek a barter, a replacement. My temporary death must hold value even if revoked. Trade that value to restore his lost beats. The Ferrier tapped quill to fang. Clever. The universe might allow it. Conservation of endings. It flipped pages, penned an addendum beside Mara's crossed-out demise. Equivalent pulse units to Elias Aveline, payable immediately. Ink gleamed. Somewhere in the mortal realm a poet exhaled, unaware that his heart now beat a little steadier. Karov then blotted the death mark. Color rushed back into Mara's cheeks, air into lungs. Pain bloomed too, sensation returning like electricity to numb limbs. She gasped. Daylight? Not yet. You must ride the downriver exit. It will deposit you at your observatory before dawn. The Ferrier replaced Ribquill in its own chest with a sound like a lock snapping shut. Farewell, mapbearer. Tonight the sky remembers its name because of you. What about you? Mara asked. Karov gestured toward the rivers, swelling now with new souls. Work never ends, but occasionally we look up. It lifted the polearm in salute. The barge rotated, aligning with a new channel that burrowed through glowing strata. Gravity or anti-gravity yanked. As Mara sped away, she glimpsed Karov diminished to a pale hook of bone against cosmic dark, already steering new arrivals. The exit channel became a geyser that punched through the floor of the mortal world. Mara erupted out of the maintenance well next to the observatory's dome, soaked in star-tinted water that evaporated before touching marble. The cracked eyepiece she'd left behind lay on the rooftop, mended, gleaming with dew of milky luminescence. She looked skyward. Above, a fresh constellation glowed near the pole star, a ring of sparks encircling a single brighter node. The Ferrier's promise. At its center nestled another, subtler figure. A chalk flourish suggesting a quill, or perhaps the grin of bone. Mara smiled, heart double thumping, her own and perhaps Elias's borrowed echo. Dawn threatened at the horizon. She lifted her restored telescope, focusing not on what had changed, but on what was finally in its rightful place. For though the underworld rivers flowed upward, the stories they carried, once mapped, circled back as gentle dust dreams that would settle on sleepers' eyelids and on the tongue of a poet who would wake that morning with verses tasting of cinnamon and starlight.